Girl, I know it's all happening in your mind. Baby girl, I know that you are having a good time. Baby girl, I know that you are always free. Baby girl, I know that you just need to breathe. Okay, so welcome to the Boot of the Basin. Today we're on ORCH. It's ORCH. I keep looking at ORCH and just like thinking, ORCH on the porch, if they don't wave. No, but it's OR, as in orchestrated objective reduction. Orchestrated objective reduction. Entanglement, microtubules, and consciousness, which sounds super boring, super scientific, and out there. Can't get a grasp on that nonsense. Let me just stop listening. Well, hopefully that's not what you're going to do. Because this is not meant to be, I'm no scientist. I really got a master's degree in English and tried to go into brain science and read Pre-Brum and David Bohm without knowing any mathematics beyond statistics and college algebra. So, no, I'm not going to bore you with things which I don't know any. I do know enough of the brain in general to be able to say that there are 12 cranial nerves, and that most things are doubled, as in the hippocampal gyri. There's not just one hippocampus. There's one on both sides. Superior colliculi are on either side of the fabled pineal gland, which is one of the few things that is just the single eye, if you will. The hypothalamus, and then you have the thalamic body. And the thalamic body is important because it regulates temperature. Okay, temperature. And don't forget that our cortex, the reptilian cortex, is operating on temperature, because cold temperature is automatically correlated with pain. Along the spine, cold is typically seen as bad and painful. So fear is a cold snap response, right? The chill is a signal to stop often. It may be a stop and reflect. It may be a good stop. Oh, get the insight. Or it may be stop. This is going to scare. This is going to harm you. You better stop. So you're getting that fear. So our cortex, of course, is relying upon the temperature, and that temperature regulation comes from the hypothalamus and thalamus working in conjunction. You're getting these afferent inputs from the fifth layer of cortical neurons. And you can't see my hand gesture, but I'm like gesturing around the oblong shape of the brain. Okay, the fifth layer of cortical neurons is the one that's been pinpointed. That's why I need to come back to this argument. It's been pinpointed by authors, anesthesiologists, Dr. Stroff, who has been an anesthesiologist for 40 years, and then physicist Roger Penrose, who's been a physicist for probably 50 years. These are respectable gentlemen who put forth our OR, because the theory goes anesthesia works on the microtubules. It's not anesthesia works in a very interesting way. It stops the microtubules from getting into quantum superposition and locking up, getting entangled, if you will. And when that stops, consciousness goes away and you just fall asleep before surgery, and then you wake up, which has always been the idea of what is consciousness. Oh, consciousness is waking up. Well, anesthesia takes that away. It works on the microtubules. What are the microtubules? Okay, well, they're not in the nucleus. They are the cellular support structure. You can call it the bones of the cell. If you think of a cell as the body, supported by a skeletal structure. It's tubulins, they're proteins, they're cylindrical, they're hollow. They have a hexagonal lattice on them as well. They're made of a tubulin and actin, are the two main ingredients. They're sort of proteins. But the study I'm referring to now let me just get to the study. It was conducted in Dublin, Ireland, in 2022. They were looking at the brain and EEG readings from the brain, and they linked the EEG readings to quantum entanglement in the brain, specifically at that fifth cortical layer of pyramidal neurons, which is what Hameroff did because that's where he saw the effects of the anesthesia. He just looked to see what was going out, what was the anesthesia affecting, because consciousness is obviously, let's get this out the way, consciousness is not required for cognition. A lot of cognition can happen, obviously, subconsciously, you can say. It's not a requirement of all of the instinctive behaviors. It's not required. The brainstem will keep you breathing, right? The R cortex near the brainstem is going to keep you aware of temperature. Then you may wake up to cover yourself in the night when you get too cold. That's basically how it works. You become conscious when you need to. Oh, I need to use the bathroom. So in the middle of the night, you wake up to use the bathroom. But your body is still going through all of its metabolic processes. Your dreams are obviously still happening with your awake, alert, waking consciousness. Maybe we should be clear. Waking consciousness is dependent upon the quantum entanglement of fifth layer cortical pyramidal neurons and their sort of, uh, you know, an oblong shape around the midbrain. The midbrain is we have the pineal, which is what Descartes called the seat of the soul, right in the center, under the fontanelle spot, which is the soft spot at the top of the brain. It makes sense. The soul body descends into the pineal center. Now, who knows if the idea of it something residing in there like consciousness, we'll never know, but it's certainly a dramatic. It certainly seems to be centralized, centrally located. The pineal gland, it governs. It's one producing melatonin. It's the one regulating how light affects your sleep-wake cycles. Okay, so wakefulness, consciousness, it just seems that it must have a role. Two superior colliculi right there. On the roof of the midbrain is where your dopamine sensors are. Oh, you're awake, you're hungry, it's time to go take some action to get food, get that reward. So dopamine is right there, serotonin is right there, melatonin, oxytocin, it's all about consciousness is the sort of the quantum entanglement of the neuron surrounding the midbrain and the activation of the midbrain. Okay, that's the arousal brain due to some kind of change in temperature, change in light, change in an emotional state. Okay, so let me get to what Google Gemini helped me. So I'm pleased after a couple of promptings, Google Gemini helped me find a study that I watched last night. Okay, at first I was stymied, but when I asked the general question about quantum entanglement and what study has shown quantum entanglement in consciousness, I got my answer. So I'm going to be sort of reading from what Google told me. The study you are likely referring to is a research project conducted at Trinity College in Dublin, according to IDA Ireland and Trinity College, Dublin. This research, supported by the Science Foundation Ireland and the Trinity College Institute of Neuroscience, suggests that human brains may utilize quantum computation. Okay, beyond the speed of light, non-local, quantum superposition. Schrodinger's cat, is in the box or not in the box? Or is the cat alive, dead? Well, there's one that is both simultaneously alive and that's the ridiculousness of it, but it's not about dead cats. It's about proton spins. Which direction is spinning? Are they left-handed or right? Well, they could be both for a bit. That's the crazy thing. But then these proton spins lock in. And that's what the researchers found. They found the proton spins in these free protons were phase locked in, so they were quantum entangled. They were united, and it was during short-term memory processes. So the person was thinking, cogito ergo sum. Therefore I am. This is how our memories are stored holographically, and they're arrived at or recovered biophotonically through light exchange. Obviously, it's electrical, so it's based upon electrons and photons also being entangled at a slightly different level. But that's not consciousness. That's the information being retrieved by consciousness. Consciousness is the proton entanglement of the pyramidal. Okay, and then the rearousal, if you will, of what's called the proto-self in the midbrain. I'm going fast because I've done this for a long time. I've read Antonio Damasio's books. Antonio Damasio was God help me, is a neurologist who has written, because Carl Pribram has passed on, so forgive me. Carl Pribram is gone. Damasio is still with us. And those are the two men I read. Pribram talked about the holographic or the holonomic brain theory, about the dendrites about quantum computation in the dendritic arborization, so that those dendritic arborizations, which would lead to an axon discharge, it wasn't axonal firing that was quantum. It was the calculations made by the dendrites, but of course, which are the little branches off of the neuron, which of course relates back to the microtubule networks. You can argue that the microtubule networks are truly quantum, feed out to the dendritic arborizations on the outside of the cell. Actually leads to the axon terminal impulse, the ion channel activated, and the axon firing the electrical signal across the myelin sheath to connect. That's what we used to think was the classical aspect of information theory, but now we find the computation is so extensive, and the neurons don't seem to hold the memories. The memories are stored somehow collectively in the network. They're not locally stored. So that goes back to Ibram and dissecting the cat's brains and still wondering how could the cat still navigate the maze when like almost all of its brain was gone. There are a lot of stories. It's a lot of monkeys and mice. And maybe cats too had to pay for this knowledge. If I'm being perfectly frank with you, it's taken us some 70 years to understand just how brain works. I'm trying to share this with you because it's sad that you will not get the theory of consciousness based upon the quantum entanglement of microtubules in the fifth layer of pyramidal neurons in the cerebral cortex. That's very specific. That's what I like about this. So what they used was proton spins in the brain's fluid as the known quantum system, identifiable with magnetic resonance imaging, MRI. It was a modified MRI for entangled spins. Okay, the specialized MRI designed to find entangled spins was revealing signals resembling EEG, electroencephalogram signals, which measure electrical brain currents. Indications of entanglement. The detection of these unusual signals suggests that the nuclear proton spins in the brain were entangled. The researchers deduced functions that interacted with the nuclear spins, coinciding, mediating entanglement, leading to the conclusion that those brain functions are quantum. These quantum processes were also found to be correlated with short-term memory performance and conscious awareness, indicating their potential importance in cognitive and conscious brain function. Okay. So this again, it's very important, okay, that we understand that it's orchestrated objective reduction theory is the theory that predicted this, that predicted you would see quantum entanglement based upon the microtubule networks. Okay, this is Roger Penrose and Stuart Hameroff. So again, this is still controversial. You know, the entangled proton spins. So it didn't specifically focus on microtubule networks within pyramidal neurons. So that still remains to be fully deduced. But it does demonstrate this idea of the proton spins consciousness is huge because that's kind of the idea that protons can change phases within entangled in these systems. They become free, if you will. It's an ionic environment, so the protons are a little more free. They're hydrogen atoms essentially, which are just protons, and then we have to imagine it's related back to so the bioelectric, biophotonic, to the fact that both the photon and the electron can also be quantum entangled. Okay, we need to understand it's the idea that photons and electrons all can become entangled. In other words, their spins are correlated. Okay, they're sharing information non-locally. Okay, this is critical. Uniting, and so what is created is the effect of the observer, the conscious being, and the observed. Okay, that's really if you want to know how that is achieved, where this study is starting to show you. It's starting to show you how it's achieved. Now, there has been another recent study. It suggests that quantum entanglement might occur within the myelin sheath of neurons. Okay, so there might be several places we see quantum entanglement happening. And what it is, it's offering that being, is what Stuart Hameroff calls it, right? You have to put the ing to the b to get being, right? So this has been the elusive philosophical touchstone. I want a being, pure being. And the ing, which resonates to the high note, E, right, the highest chakra point, the crown of the brain, ing, it is right there. It's that little spark of rearousal when the light changes, and then you begin to thought, and it's at a brainwave, 30 to 40 hertz cycles per second, and it's really that simple. And the attention blinks. That's another thing we learn in cognitive science. You take it for granted that you think your attention is more fixed and stable than it is. It's constantly blinking to be re-upped, and that's the real consciousness. The real consciousness is not this belated observer who has language facility. That's the sort of left brain lie. That's the ego rationalizing. Oh, I was aware of that. No, it blinked out. It's really a proto consciousness that's constantly being updated, and then you have the autobiographical on top, and you have the sort of conscious, like good versus evil, and you have all of Kant's supposed categories. It does seem like the fact of the matter, most brilliant aspect is that these fifth layer pyramidal neurons have the lambic and the cortical inputs. So they can take information from the midbrain area, and they can relate back to to memories. And then this goes back to your two hippocampal gyri, your gyruses, whatever the plural of gyrus is. And then your amygdalae, that's your limbic system. That's the emotional and long-term memory aspect of the short term, okay, which is what we're talking about with the pyramidal neurons and the temporal lobes, if you will. Because you have the optic in the back of the brain, the oblong brain. It's giving you all the visual information. Then you have the executive seat of judgment in the front of the brain. And then the processing is happening on both sides, the temporal lobes in particular. And that's all we have to say today. That's really about it. We hope that you enjoy this podcast. I have on my Substack, of course, I linked this study as it's Trinity Study 111. I think it was published on January 11th in 2022. So I like the 111. It's starting us off on charting a new course. And the goal will be to really explore consciousness and its connection to Buddhism, because the Buddha, the basin, it's all about the pelvic chin area, that as well as the Japanese, the hara, Hara, that really the intelligence of the body is in the abdominal neurons, the stomach brain, the heart brain, okay? And believe it or not, the coccyx. We don't really talk about those first 8 cells down there by the coccyx. That would be where the inner child resides. And so that's the Buddha, the basis, getting back to where that inner child is happy, and the body is truly balanced, and the spine is relaxed, and the pressure behind the neck can go, because we imagine a self in the brain. That just isn't so. The self is the entire spirit. It's a human energy field, and it's beyond space and time parameters, because it actually includes a higher self that obviously cannot exist in the same space and time as you. So there is no higher self in the sense that it can't inhabit the same space as the self. But there is no self, because the ego is an after the fact, a priori illusion, as Kant told us. Even Descartes, I think, therefore I am, is secondary. That's what Damasio showed us. Damasio showed us the emotional awareness comes first for the proto-self. Okay, so it's a feeling that happens first. The feeling that something has changed. That's the most evanescent look at consciousness, because that's what consciousness is. It's a proto-self blinking in and out, as far as it relates to just in the immediate temperature or light-based environments. That goes back to, as I was saying, the thalamus, the pineal gland, thalamus, and this fifth cortical neuron, as well as the reticular activating nucleus and the anterior cingulate cortex. I'm being very specific. These are areas that are the most involved in consciousness. We'll continue on this topic. I look forward to discussions with people on these topics. So if you are somebody invested in this topic considerably and you have expertise, I would love to speak to you on this. Om Shanti Om.